This algebra video looks at how to get the difference of two squares. First of all, what does a difference of two squares question look like? Well, at its most basic, it would look something like this. Factorise a squared minus b squared. First of all, in these questions, we should identify what is being squared. It's not hard in this question. Obviously, a is being squared and b is being squared. And then to factorise, we'll put down two sets of brackets. In the first position of each bracket, I'll write down the first term that's being squared. So in this case, a goes in the first position in both brackets. At the end of each bracket, I'll put in the second term that's being squared. So in this case, that's b. So b goes at the end of each bracket. And then I must decide on my signs. Well, with the difference of two squares, I always have one positive and one negative sign. The order of these doesn't matter. I'm going to put my positive sign in the first bracket and my negative sign in the second bracket. So in example 2, I want to factorise x squared minus 4. So like I said previously, it's a good idea to identify first of all what's being squared. But in this case, obviously x is being squared. But what about the second term? What do I square to get 4? 4 is 2 squared. Now I haven't factorised yet, even though I've written down some brackets. I've just identified what's being squared to make it easy for me to complete the final line of my factorisation. So now I write down my two pairs of brackets, and the first term that's being squared goes in the beginning of each bracket, and the second term that's being squared goes in the end of each bracket, and one's a plus and one's a minus. Example 3 asks us to factorise 9x squared minus 16y squared. So again, I must first of all identify what is being squared. In the first term, I would have to square 3 to get 9, and the x is obviously being squared. In the second term, I would have to square 4 to get 16, and the y is again clearly being squared. And now I'm ready to factorise. So I write down my two sets of brackets. The term in the first bracket will go into the beginning of each. The term in the last bracket will go into the end of each. One's a plus and one's a minus. And that's my answer for example 3. Example 4 asks me to factorise 25 minus x squared y squared. So again, just first of all identify what's being squared in each term. So what can I square to get 25? Well, I can square 5. And what can I square to get x squared y squared? Well, there's an x being squared, and there's a y being squared. And now what do you think will go in my brackets at the end of this? It'll be 5 plus xy by 5 minus xy. Again, if you had the minus and the plus in the other order, that's totally fine as well. Example 5 looks a little bit different. It doesn't just say factorise, it says fully factorise. This is a hint that I probably have 2 steps in my solution. And in fact, when you look at the 8 and the 18, they stand out as not being square numbers. So what I need to do first of all here is a little bit of basic factorisation. I need to have a think about these two terms and see, do they have anything in common first? So looking at the coefficients 8 and 18, would there be anything that would go into both of those? So 2 will go into both of those. And what would I write in my bracket then? Well, I'd put 4 minus 9x squared in there. Okay, so this looks more promising because I know that 4 is a square number and so is 9. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this line, I'm going to write it again, but I'm going to write down what's being squared to make each of the terms that I've underlined. So I write down the 2 just like in the previous line, and I'm just making a note of what's being squared to make 4. Okay, 2 is being squared to make 4. And then I want to think what's being squared to make 9x squared. So I'd need to square 3 to make the 9, and I'd need to square x to make the x squared. Just bear in mind that this line here isn't me doing any extra factorisation, it's just identifying exactly what's being squared so that I can do my difference of two squares. Now, when I'm doing the difference of two squares part, it's just this bit inside in the brackets that really involves the difference of two squares. That doesn't mean that I ditch the 2. 2 is still part of the expression. It needs to stay sitting there in order for the expression at the end to be correct. So I'll just leave it stuck on the front, and then I'll fill these two brackets in on the basis of 2 squared minus 3x squared. So what should go in those brackets? Well, I should have 2 plus 3x and 2 minus 3x. Keep an eye out for that phrasing fully factorise. Generally, it means I've got a couple of steps along the way to my answer.